and thank you all of you for showing up here, flipping the script on a Sunday morning, not being in bed, and being here at the auditorium. So back in 2013, I was covering the war in Syria as a journalist. One of these days on the field, I was taken to a makeshift refugee camp. This camp used to be a school and had been turned into a refugee shelter. I still vividly remember walking through the corridors of this school and realizing that there was no running water, there was no electricity, and food was scarce. I especially remember meeting this family of 7. I remember the father telling me why they had fled their home in Aleppo because of the intense fighting in the city. And I remember him telling me how difficult the conditions were in the refugee camp. They had to sometimes burn plastic overnight to stay warm, sometimes their old clothes. That day, I filled my notebook with notes and went back and wrote a report. The report got published, and I received a lot of great feedback, a lot of good comments. As a journalist, I'm able, and I'm really, really lucky to experience these intense moments, these difficult situations of crisis. But I often wonder how much of the work I do contributes to change in real life. And I also wonder, there's a burning question always in my head. How can I really take my audiences to the places I go to? How could, for instance, in this example, how could I have taken my audiences to that school? How could I have made them walk down the same corridors that I walked down? Give them a sense of that space. How can I take them there and make them meet the family that I met? And therefore, be able to contribute to a better understanding of reality, to be able to make them, give them a different understanding of a different reality. About a couple of years after that event in my life, I discovered the technology of virtual reality. A friend of mine put a headset on my head and said, "Enjoy, go dive with the dolphins." And I didn't really understand what he was saying. Until in the headset, I was under the ocean. I was underwater in the depths of the ocean, swimming with a school of dolphins. I realized that film was called The Click Effect, and it followed 2 marine scientists who were understanding or researching communication between dolphins and sperm whales. That was fascinating. I had left my real world, the world around me where I was physically present, and I was in the depths of this ocean swimming with these dolphins. And that moment was this aha moment in my life where I said, virtual reality can give me the tool to take my audiences to the places I go to as a journalist, to these places of humanitarian crisis, and help them understand and live the moments that I live. When you are in a virtual world, you really do escape your real world and really embody that experience. You're immersed in another world. Before we get deeper into the work that we do, I want to give a broad framework to understand virtual reality experiences. Virtual reality, of course, can be used in a lot of different fields. It's used in medicine, it's used for gaming mainly. Most of us know virtual reality from gaming. And of course for storytelling, and what I'm using it also for journalism. There are 2 different kinds mainly of virtual reality experiences. Firstly, there's one that allows 3 degrees of freedom. That means you're sitting in a space where you have a panoramic view of the world around you. And then there's an experience that involves 6 degrees of freedom, which doesn't only give you a panoramic view of the world around you, but actually gives you agency to walk in an experience, to touch things, and to interact with objects around you in that experience. And last year, my team and I at Now Here Media, which is a storytelling studio, immersive storytelling studio, we embarked on the journey of telling a difficult story from Iraq, from Fallujah, using 6 degrees of freedom within virtual reality. Now, in Iraq, ISIS has left Fallujah in 2016 December. So they are no longer in control of the city. But they've left behind deadly reminders of their presence. And this comes in the form of improvised explosive devices, or roadside bombs as we know it, or even sometimes booby-trapped homes. So what might typically happen when refugees or civilians are returning back home after the war is that you might come home, open the door, and that opening of the door might set off a bomb, taking civilian lives. Or you might come back to your home and try turning on the electricity, and that might set off an explosion, causing lives, harm to lives. Before I go deeper into this VR experience that we created, I want to show you a short trailer of the experience.
You know, our house is our home. When ISIS came here, I heard fighting between them and the security forces. Bombs were falling from planes. We took the car and fled. We said that we are going home, even if that meant we had to live on the rubble, because we were fed up with being strangers. We heard that there were houses where the electricity was booby-trapped. If you see a bomb, you would usually recognize it. But this stuff is new. They were my wings.
So, Home After War is the story of Amaid, who lost 2 sons to an explosion. And it's a tragic story. For me, and I think for most of us in this room, home is a place that signifies safety, that signifies security. But for a lot of refugees and civilians coming back home after the recent war with ISIS, that's not the case. For a lot of civilians, as I was saying, returning back home, home is not safe. It's ambiguous. Of course, after returning back after 3 years of having spent in a refugee camp, it gives you immense pleasure to come back home, but not knowing if your home is safe creates a dilemma. So we knew that the house would play a huge role, would be the main stage where the story takes place. So we captured Amaid's home using a technique called photogrammetry. Photogrammetry involves taking a lot of pictures of a space and then being able to recreate it in a 3D model that you can then virtually walk in. So each of these white dots on this video represents a picture that was taken. We took about 3,000 to 4,000 pictures of Amaid's home and then put it together in a software to be able to recreate it then later as a virtual space that takes audiences to Fallujah, to Amaid's home. Sometimes my brain tricks me. I've been to Amaid's home in Fallujah. When I wear the headset, I sometimes feel like I am there. And that's the power of this virtual technology of using photogrammetry as well, which is very, very realistic recreation of reality. In any story, in any piece of work that's about communication, story is king, is queen. If you don't have a good story, you can have the best technology in the world and you can have the best equipment to shoot that story. But it's really the essence of the story that makes your project successful or not. In Home After War, we were very, very lucky to have our protagonist, Amit, who was willing to tell his story, although a tragic one, to the world. And this creates a very, very intimate, emotional journey for the audience. We filmed Amit using a stereo camera rig. So 2 DSLR cameras that were rigged together, as you see in the picture over there, to recreate the left and the right eye in the virtual reality experience. We then keyed Amit out of the green screen environment and placed him in the house that in his house that we had captured using photogrammetry. So when the user wears the headset, they find themselves walking and interacting in Amit's home, and they come face to face with Amit. It's a very one-on-one experience that people have. And he tells you what happened, what is his story after the war. This experience, of course, was not created without its set of challenges. Working with a technology like virtual reality in Iraq has its set of challenges. The security situation in Iraq is still unsafe. We were staying in Baghdad and had to go every day to Fallujah to gather our material and to do our research. We were always accompanied by army convoys because there are still ISIS sleeper cells in Iraq that may be active. Secondly, we were traveling with this kind of equipment, suspicious looking. These 2 360 cameras, they have 6 lenses that look all around, and they look like a UFO or a spying device. There's also a lot of rods and nuts and bolts and plates that we had to carry to build rigs on location. Lots of radio mics, batteries. So just typically stuff that can get you stuck at a checkpoint. And believe me, we spent hours and hours waiting at checkpoints, getting clearances. But at the end of it, it was all worth it. We created a beautiful experience that was premiered at the Venice International Film Festival in Italy. And since then, we've been able to show the experience in many different places, including the United Nations in Geneva. And to show the impact of virtual reality and this medium, I want to play you a small clip where UN diplomats talk about having seen the experience and what they felt about it.
This is so real. Like, you cannot replicate this through like PowerPoint slides or a chalkboard or note cards. And for me, it was real.
I will grab everybody I can possibly get to come and see it. And I only wish, as a teacher, that my students could all experience that, because I think if they could, they would see things in a whole new light.
To actually be in those spaces and to physically be there and emotionally be there is I've never experienced anything like it. I mean,
really, really clever way to just, shake you a little bit and make you realize that, it's probably the closest we're ever going to come to being able to actually experience what it's like, and I thought it was a really clever way of doing it.
Oh, it was really, really powerful. I mean, I kind of could have imagined what could have been inside, but being inside and feeling and living this experience is just amazing. Actually, kind of, I'm speechless.
In a force.
Stop waging war and peace to the world.
Perfect.
So that's what it has. That's the potential virtual reality has. It can really help people experience other realities and be in someone else's shoes. And that's the sense of embodiment in someone else's shoes is one of the most powerful aspects of VR. Today, we all play different roles in society. But what would it be like if you were playing someone else's role just for 5 minutes, just for a day? How would it feel? What if I was playing your role and you were playing my role? Virtual reality can make that possible. And by making that possible, it can really create empathy and compassion between people. and between different kinds of people, let's call it that way. A study in 2018 done at the Stanford University showed that when people in a virtual reality experience were confronted with homelessness, when they were playing homeless people and had to make choices in an experience being homeless, after the experience, they were much more likely to feel empathy and more compassion towards homeless people. Jeremy Bailenson, the head of the virtual human interaction lab at Stanford, said, experiences are what define us as humans. So it's not surprising that an intense experience in VR is more impactful than imagining something. And we used this sense of embodiment, the power of VR, to give you the feeling of being someone else in our experience, in an experience that we created called Kya Yahi Pyar Hai, or Is This Love? We created this experience in partnership with Love Matters India, a nonprofit working towards increasing awareness about intimate partner violence. And as part of this campaign, we created this video in which when you wear the headset, you become the woman who experiences control and abuse in her relationship. So you're confronted by her boyfriend, and you go through many stages in many scenarios where you are being controlled by your boyfriend. And we showed this experience over 10 days at 3 metro stations in Delhi to a lot of different people. And the studies that we did showed that the way people viewed intimate partner violence and what constituted intimate partner violence changed once they had watched the experience, once they had been through the experience. Especially for men who had never had the perspective of being in a woman's shoes and experiencing control. And this is the shift in perspective that virtual reality allows. Now, of course, as we've seen, whether it's war or whether it's love, virtual reality does have a huge impact on us and has the potential to have a lot of impact on us. Studies show that your brain perceives VR and VR experiences in a different way than it would perceive a film or a book. There's much less distance between you and the medium when it comes to VR. So it can be used if the thing is there's also a risk with that. If virtual reality can be used to increase empathy and to increase compassion, that means it can also be used to spread hatred. If it can be used to bring people together, it can also be used to tear people apart. We as a society today are at a crucial stage in defining this technology, which is in its early stages. How are we going to use it? Are we going to use it to create better human beings, to create a better society? Or are we going to use it for the worse? The choice is really with us. Thank you very much.